just to bring it back a bit on labor migration, I think the challenge, as my colleagues are saying, we all, of course, aim for unities despite the diversities. No? But in doing that, we really have to confront among ourselves, especially issues that migration tends to put forward. For example, if you are going to fight for equality of rights, would receiving countries be willing to labor movements or workers in the receiving countries, would they be willing to fight for equal rights and protection and even residency of migrants in their countries? If we are going to push for the same treatment of peoples, will the host countries fight for families of these migrants to join them so that they become one community themselves? These are issues that labor migration makes very sharp and distinct. Or if you go to the Middle East, where more than 60 to 70% of the population are foreign workers, would the country, if they allow them to vote, be open to the possibility that even foreigners might lead their countries? So these are challenges that globalized world order would pose among ourselves. Therefore, yes, we need to confront the powers that be, but between us, between labor movements, we also really need to contend with the reality that globalized workforce and globalized existence really need to shake up our notions of person, state, and identities. So, and hopefully these kinds of process help us to do that. But to me, the fact that we are continuing to discourse this and therefore build common unities around this, we have demonstrated that we can. Now, for example, the last one is our victory in gaining ILO Convention 189 on decent work for domestic workers. First of all, congratulations to our colleagues for winning that. And for the Philippines, having ratified it last year, and hopefully this week they also ratified the local domestic workers law. A lot of that was because we were able to overcome differences between local and migrant domestic workers, between traditional trade unions and more progressive trade unions, in finding common unities despite all the differences. And if that was an illustration of how far we can go, then I'm very hopeful. So labor movement and different movements coming together, I'm very hopeful because we have demonstrated that we can achieve a lot despite all of our diversities. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Well, here we are. It's time to start to talk also with you. So we have two microphones in the middle of the corridor. Okay, please, just go to the microphone, yeah? Yeah, we can. Okay, you keep it. Keep it. If something, no, keep it for you. Okay, hello. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm Willy from Solidarity Center. Our global context now is inevitable for the workers to move even beyond their national boundaries. And as you mentioned, as the speakers mentioned, that by experiencing those difficulties and challenges in different countries, especially the receiving countries, there should be unity, there should be global unity among us. You were mentioning several times about global unity, but I haven't heard any practical solution or suggestions from the speakers. How can we make this global networking as a reality, taking into account that we are also facing the global capital, which they have been successful to network to apply, for instance, outsourcing, contract workers, and now it is successful everywhere, in every country. And how about the workers? In this case, migrant workers. What kind of practical strategies that you want to suggest? Thank you.
Thank you. Tell me, is translation working on? Is going on? Yeah? Okay, because Spanish spoken and French spoken also can ask, please. Okay, you have to go to the microphone, people who is handing. Okay. Okay, let's go. Just a moment.
Colin Raja from Migrants' Rights International and also the National Network for Immigrant Refugee Rights based in the US. A question for Angela. I know you mentioned it was a really important point about the need to build alliances with other movements, particularly African American communities in the US and other movements in the US. I know there's some level of expectation for a possible push towards immigration reform this coming year. We also have the opportunity and the challenge of the UN high-level dialogue on migration and development taking place next year, also in New York, in the US. Do you also see this as an opportunity and perhaps a challenge for us in the US to also try to build alliances and develop some kind of working cooperation with other movements around the world, other social movements, as well as other migrant rights movements from other regions in the world that will be in New York and looking at this very critical issue, and a lot of eyes looking towards the US next year especially.
Thank you.
I'm Joselito Natividad of the Asia Pacific Mission for Migrants. I agree with a lot of the points raised by the speakers, especially Raul, about the systemic problems that are behind forced migration. And we also agree that it is forced migration because it is labor migration, and it is tying down a lot of workers into jobs overseas. So while I agree with most of these points, I also found it remiss in so many. Like the fact that before we can actually unite and before we can actually think of other worlds that are possible or alternatives, we have to critique first these problems. And one of the deepest problems, I think, is that there is an ongoing paradigm within the neoliberal paradigm itself of global capitalism, which is, of course, this migration for development concept. No? Now, this started out with the World Bank and the OECD and all the other intergovernmental agencies, and now the GFMD is promoting this. We have known this for the past 5 years that the GFMD has been focusing on selling this idea that you can use remittances for development. No? And this is actually the driving force behind this modern day slavery. What I would call this modern day slavery, and not just trafficking that was raised earlier by the keynote speaker. I think it was overly focused on trafficking, but I think what is more crucial here is to focus on this labor export paradigm, this remittance-driven approach by the GFMD. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have another microphone if that's part of the room. So go ahead, please.
I'm afraid it's, yeah. I'm Nalini from India, from the International Domestic Workers Network. Thank you to the speakers.
Lower, please.
Hiya.
Is it working?
Yeah, it's working.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So we heard from one of the speakers this concept of global citizenship. And I think I would like that we reflect a bit more on this idea of global citizenship and borderless nations, because we also understand that global capital is attacking resources in each country. So when resources are being exploited because of borderlessness, and we have local populations who are struggling for survival because their local resources are being taken away by the multinational companies, how do we relate these two concepts of global citizenship without borders, and how do we safeguard our resources for local populations who are being now exploited by global capital? So I would like some clarity on these issues. Thank you.
The question, we know what the problem migrant worker is facing home and abroad. What can we do? Can we concretely sort out some issues and make a real organization or international institution that can really work from grassroots to international, all kinds of organization, not that we are scattered. So please, from this conference, make some issues concretely that can apply for all the countries, all the nationalities barrier to abolish that, and please make it real effort to make this kind of concrete some forms of institutionalized systems. Thank you.
Not have a skill. So, A, we must either say that all of us are equally skilled, or we say that some people are skilled and some people are not skilled. But then we created this semi-skilled person. It is a semi-skilled person who is always exploited because he is not skilled to a particular job, but he does everything. I'll give you an example. If I function as a doctor, nurse, and a pharmacist, I would call myself semi-skilled. We have electrician, we have one person doing the job of an electrician, a plumber, and a carpenter. All three, one job. So he becomes a semi-skilled person. So this is the semi-skilled person is exploited much more because he's not really defined. So this is one issue which we must address. Two, we have so many associations and organizations represented here. I'm just wondering whether it would be possible if we have a delegation to come and visit these countries to find out, I'm talking about officially, after getting proper permissions, to see how these low-paid workers are doing, what are the issues, what is the number we are talking about, what are the real issues, are they happy, unhappy, and we have some data which can be collected from them. I'm just wondering, is it possible that we can have a delegation come and visit these places officially? Thank you.
I want two questions to be answered. First, I would like to question before Mr. Rahul. You see, you are a scholar on the subject of migration and development network. And what we all are discussing about the difficulties faced by migrant workers across the border. And we are deporting a maximum number of people from our South Asian region to the Gulf countries. I would like to ask your suggestion. During this deportation and the difficulties faced by these migrant workers, we see the policy interventions from the governments are very minimal. What should be the role of the civil society organizations and the trade unions in particular to push these policy interventions from the government circle so that their problem can be resolved and can be prevented from the point of exit or point of entry after the migrant period? Second question I would like to put before Rex Verona, because you are working for the Asian migrants. I want the question that during all your interventions, you have discussed the issues. Now, how concentrated strategy we can chalk out in future to resolve the crisis faced by the Asian migrants in the Middle East? What should be concentrated efforts and what the role should be there interconnected between the civil society organizations, the trade unions, with the government at a tripartite mechanism to resolve this crisis? Thank you.
I can say a few things, nevertheless. I think networking is something that is very important, and we have been starting to learn a lot about networking. And building like global coalitions is something that is also very important. For this, we need to have I think also like common agendas, action and also political and research agendas. If I'm talking about workers, academics, So I think some of the things that are important is that we have a very fluent communication among us regarding also very important and strategic data that can be very powerful in our common struggles. I just want to give you an example. We have been estimating, in the case of the Mexico-US corridor, the contribution of migrants to the growth of GDP in the US, and more than 32% of the growth of the GDP in this since the year 2000 is due to migrants, mostly from Latin American migrants and Mexicans. This is very important, or 1 of every 4 pensions in the US is financed by a migrant, and 1 of every 5 pensions is financed by an undocumented migrant. So these are, I think, very important issues that should be taken into account in order to defend migrant rights. But I had another question that I think is very important. The issue, so this first point is we need a deep understanding of something that is not very clear. How capitalism is being restructured, and this demands, I think, a lot of activity and communication among civil organizations, migrant organizations, labor organizations, unions, and progressive academia. The other point is deportation. In the last 6 years, 3.5 million Mexicans were deported, mostly in the streets in the U.S. And the problem is that there is no strategy. If our governments are considered as migrant export nations, no? And that liberates our governments from the responsibility. Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. No. Okay. So I was trying to emphasize one point that I think is very important. That is one of the big issues is that we have to solve the problem of unequal development. If we have this unequal exchange among nations, then the need for people to migrate is stronger. So we need to tackle the root causes of migration. And the only way to tackle the root causes of migration is to dismantling what is causing this unprecedented way of uneven development that characterizes neoliberal globalization today. And this is, I think, a very fundamental issue, and we have to engage in this task. And for this, we have also to discuss with our own national countries and engage in national countries in order to have a different human development sustainable strategy that allows for more equal development worldwide.
Gaining in currency, depending on who is using them. And thanks to globalization, we're now in a situation where constructs of global solidarity are often subverted, particularly in the WTO construct, for example, who talks about most favored nation. So basically, any southern country is the friend of a northern country, and for that reason we must open up our borders economically and to trade. even though there's a lack of reciprocity. And that's not the kind of borderlessness to which I'm referring. I think that, however, the notion of global citizenship and globalization, in my understanding, are completely different constructs. Globalization in the construct, in the context of the political economy, is much more to do with capitalism, and it's a much more rapacious and greedy and profit-driven and profit-mongering discourse. Global citizenship, however, speaks about an inclusive economy where people of color and people of the global south, or the global north even, in terms of their own internal migration patterns, are able to seek solace and be able to receive the kind of recompense and the benefits of their work. And that's a completely different sort of construct. I'd also like to suggest as well that some kind of a double standard is needed by the global south, because it always is as though we need to remove a mosquito net and enable anyone and everyone to come through and benefit from our resources. And I think that we need to be much more, slightly protect our interests as people in the global south and build our own solidarity economies and our own solidarity discourses, which means being able to balance the movement of people much more easily between protecting ourselves from the interests and the agendas of global companies and transnational companies, which really don't benefit us in any way. But also as well to talk about, I think the brothers said something about this hierarchy of skills between skilled, semi-skilled, or unskilled. And I tend to think that it's actually a false dichotomy. I tend to think also that it really brings us into contact with our own class contradictions. And it illustrates that as well. One of the first instincts that we have, once we move away from survivalist, one of the first instincts of a migrant community or a migrant family will be to seek a better life. And I think that it's very important to continually have a class consciousness and have a new consciousness, an ongoing consciousness. I think it's also very critical to understand, I understand very clearly and identify very clearly with workers' struggles, mainly because I recall where I come from. And I think that it's important for all of us to have a collective memory, institutional memory, and collective memory of struggle as well.
Multiracial coalition that actually voted President Obama to a second term as president. And I think that, in fact, there's a new majority in the United States, multi-ethnic majority, that has arrived and is being recognized in the United States. And I think that the part of this majority, the immigrants make up a strong aspect of this multi-ethnic majority. And one of the interesting things about the immigrants in the United States that can actually open the borders, if you will, is making these very, very strong alliances, networking, binational networking of the immigrants that live in the United States and the immigrants that live outside of the United States in their home countries. And engaging these communities, these binational communities, transnational communities, in advocating for change of policies. Because I live in the United States, so I guess I go to that, use examples of the United States. Recently, NALAC participated in the Caravan for Peace and Justice, that Mexicans that have been the victims of violence because of the drug trafficking and the violence that goes, that is being implemented in the Mexican society because of the so-called war on drugs, but also highlighting the fact that now human trafficking has been made part of this of the drug trafficking in Mexico, and now obviously affecting the United States. So the Mexican community and the immigrants in the United States joined forces to highlight the need of a change of policy. And I think that these are some of the things that we can do to begin to change, to engage both governments, our government of home country government and our country of origin, is to looking at changing the policies that affects both of our countries. And in terms of the UN, I think the UN is a very important global institution that we should take our call for a just and humane immigrant policies that put human beings at the center of development and not what we have now. So I think that the UN meetings that happen, we should join forces to go and use that avenue to highlight, our policies and proposals. Thank you, Angela.
Yeah, thank you for those questions and the answers so far, or the thoughts so far. There was a question about trying to make the global unity a reality, more practical examples about how globalization might work our way, beginning with our unity. And I apologize, I haven't given any examples really. So just a few examples. Examples like these meetings. These meetings are so real for developing the unity as well as strategies, but unity first. This meeting here, the meeting last week at the Global Forum on Migration Development, so many civil society actors from around the world, from different sectors, including academia, who I encounter in these meetings not at all up in the ivory tower, but doing some of the finest thinking in the front ranks, where sometimes the most important unity of vision is around a focus on a specific issue or some specific issues. So the movement, in my experience, goes from a unity to effectiveness, best when it focuses on some specific issues. So an issue that, for example, that seems to be moving, that might be one we would consider here, that might have some success in the next couple of years, pertains to some of our keynoters' presentation, and that is on the recruitment side of misery in so much migration today. There seems to many people, it certainly was expressed last week among civil society in Mauritius, there seems to be a lining up of some of the same general sense of horror towards the recruitment industry abuses of migrants that across multiple kinds of actors, not just civil society, but very much civil society, and some of the governments, and some of the funders, and some of the business actors, even legitimate business actors, and some of the international organizations with conventions on rights. A lineup that's unusual and that points to unusual possibility. And we look at unity building and unity action there. Specific meetings that build the networks. I just would point to Migrant Rights International and the Pan-African Network in defense of migrant rights that has so many of its leaders here, including Milka Jacinto, who will be talking with us on many occasions this week. Stepping forward into building regional and continental networks. That's how we build unity. And we cross-connect unities between regions and the rest of the world. Building specific organizations. This new global coalition on migration is not even a year old, or a year and a couple of months old at most. It's new, and it's a holder, one more holder of unity. Can we come together and hold together with that, in addition to our own networks at international, regional, and local levels? And last, probably the best example, if I can offer, and really I'm going to stand in respect to this, the movement at national and regional and international levels for the creation and the adoption of the Convention on Domestic Workers. What a magnificent example of unity, of strategy, of success. So far, what a magnificent example. And this goes to the question from Susanna from Bangladesh. How do we build this movement and unity and this success across the multiple levels and up and down, horizontal and vertical? Not just international to international, regional to regional, but up and down and all around. The example to look at is the example of the movements of domestic workers with domestic workers and to change the situation for domestic workers. That's the best example.
I have my own mind. And I pretty much want to pick up from where John left off that a lot of these examples will be discussed in the workshops, and we will not pretend therefore to elaborate here. Our task is more or less to frame or to give the scope of the discussion for the first day, which is to critique the models and paradigms. So we do hope that in the 13 simultaneous workshops encompassing about 60 different topics, we hope you will do that, because then we will ask for 3 key reports from each workshop to share in the plenary. But having said that, as John was saying, we have a lot of examples by which we have confronted the globals that be. The latest one is the domestic workers, and that's a good example in terms of policy success, an international treaty, but also of organizing, networking. Prior to that, we stopped WTO in 2005 in Hong Kong. Again, pretty much the unities of other groups here, when they said it was impossible to confront from Seattle and different WTO meetings, they were not able to do a Doha agreement after Hong Kong because of the strong protest that we have. We have a lot of success in confronting UNFCCC, the Framework Convention on Climate Change. We are still losing the battle there, but we have intervened a lot in making sure that, let's say, Kyoto wasn't just simply put on the trash. These are global struggles, but at the national levels, there are many, and I think each one